everybody hear me okay? First, I would like to start off by stating how honored that I am for even having had the opportunity to participate in the MPLD program as a cohort 2 fellow. When charged with the responsibility to identify a problem in the child welfare system, I first thought, where do I begin? I decided to choose a problem that not only affected many children within the child welfare system, but also affected my family personally. As an adoptive parent of siblings, sibling separation resonated deeply with me. Pictured here are my children who are biological siblings. At 2 and 4, you can see and almost feel the connection captured in the snapshot. Unfortunately, they have other siblings to whom they haven't been able to maintain regular communication without cause. As I thought about this more, I wondered what stands in the way of doing what we know is right. In the next few slides, I will walk you through the steps taken in my action research project and conclude with lessons learned and future considerations. The problem identified was the lack of preserving and maintaining birth family connections once children have been placed with a specific focus on sibling relationships. What are some of the reasons why the sibling relationship is not maintained? I hypothesize that the lack of resources and inconsistency support and inadequate preparation as being some of the factors that contribute to this problem. It is assumed that when one knows better, that they do better. Could it be that the significance and importance of the sibling bond is not fully understood? In the next few slides, we will look at a depiction of what happens to siblings in care. If time had allotted, I would have liked to show the video clip removed, which can be found on YouTube. So definitely, when you have an opportunity, if you have not seen that already, definitely watch it in its entirety. Instead, I have taken some screenshots of the relevant scenes. Here we see Zoe caring for her younger sibling, a picture all too familiar with children who are parentified due to their caregivers being unable, unavailable, or sometimes unwilling to fulfill their parental duties. For just a moment, I would ask that each of you close your eyes. Think back to a cherished memory with your sibling. And if you didn't have a sibling, then think of that close friend or cousin that you called your sibling. Now think of a time when they drove you mad and you told them, go away. Now imagine someone took them away and you didn't know when or if you'd ever see them again. You may open your eyes. That feeling is what I imagine Zoe is feeling here. Not only are you leaving your parent and home, but now you are losing your sibling as well. So in this picture here, we see Zoe is, they're being separated. They're being removed. CPS has decided that they need to be removed from the home. And they're being, not only are they being removed, but they are going in, they're being put in different vehicles. In the left-hand picture, we see a Zoe who seems to have lost hope and probably is suffering from grief and loss from her family and her sibling. In the right-hand side, we see Zoe sees a glimmer of hope outside of her window, and we're not sure what it is. Zoe and baby brother are reunited. If maintaining the connection between siblings is so important, why doesn't it just happen? When we know better, we do better, right? So the question I asked was if more information and education was needed to help decision makers make better decisions. So how do we find that out? And here is the research question that I came up with, which Arlene read earlier. Again, is if foster and adoptive families and staff are offered more information and education on the importance of the sibling relationship, will the parents' knowledge increase, and will staff attitudes or perceptions and positions on support and sibling connections change? Here we have the methods used in the Action Research Project. And on the next slides, I will walk you through the steps taken, starting with the literature review. Research indicates that maintaining the sibling bond lessens the loss and grief associated with separation. It supports children's identity development and helps them overcome adversity as they prepare for adulthood. As referenced in the Rhode Island Sibling Bill of Rights, the sibling relationship provides needed continuity and stability during a child's placement. It further reiterates that sibling separation is a significant and distinct loss that must be repaired by frequent and regular contact. The key word above in placement is placement versus finalization. Though the courts and legislators have begun responding to the need to preserve the important relationship, most only address the issues pertaining to when children are in foster care / pre-finalization. These limits exclude focus on preserving the sibling bond post-adoption, guardianship, and the sad truth of aging out, adequately stated in siblings' rights to visitation post-adoption. While both state and federal statutes exist aimed at nurturing and preserving these sibling bonds during children's stay in foster care placement, none provided for continued contact post-adoption. As a result, siblings entering foster care with pre-existing relationships to one another face the additional trauma of not being able to remain in contact with one another post-adoption. That particular research utilized the New Jersey case law and referenced the statutes outlined in the Child Placement Act. After a child has been adopted, the court will not exercise its constitutional parents patrie jurisdiction over a parent's fundamental right to raise their children as they see fit, absent a showing that it must do so to protect the child from harm. Post-adoption, newly formed families are legally afforded the same familial autonomy, privacy, and limitations that biological families are entitled to. As was mentioned, Rhode Island has a specific bill that addresses the Sibling Bill of Rights. Here we have the Sibling Bill of Rights. I'm sure it's maybe a little bit small to read, but there is a copy within Hoover of a handout that you can see it in its entirety. The Sibling Bill of Rights was approved in 2012 by the New England Youth Association and New England Association of Child Welfare Commissioners and Directors. The specific guidelines it provides is preserving the sibling relationship while children are in care. It specifically addresses the rights of every foster child. There are not currently laws on the state level that address the sibling relationship post-adoption or finalization. It is estimated that there are over 400,000 children in foster care across the U.S., and over 70% of these children are members of a sibling group. The second part of the methods that was used was a focus group. Because there was not a lot of information, most of the literature review provided a lot of pertinent and valuable information regarding the importance of the sibling connection. Minimal information was available to provide insight as to the foster and adoptive parents' perspective on supporting the sibling relationships. To address this, a focus group was held. 4 families, 6 individuals participated in this. It included participants from more than one state. Given that they were providing their perspective, it wasn't specific to one state. During this focus group, families expressed and shared what they knew about the importance of the sibling relationship. I also asked them questions about the Sibling Bill of Rights and asked them about their knowledge of the Sibling Bill of Rights in their states or any that existed, and none had ever heard of it. Originally, I was going to create a training to provide for foster and adoptive families But instead I found this training that was provided through the foster club that had all of the key information regarding sibling bonds. So we decided to go through with this training with the support of Adoption Rhode Island, who provided the funding and allocated funds for the families to participate. Families were able to participate in this educational training where they watched the Removed To video, the second part to the video referenced earlier. They explored research intervention strategies and resources. They read the foster club story, and then they was able to join in a discussion online. 4 families followed through with participating in the training. 10 families were contacted through targeted efforts with DCYF. Initially, 9 of the 10 families expressed interest in participating. Of those 9 families, unfortunately, only 4 was able to participate. Some of the barriers were lack of follow-through on parts of families who initially expressed interest. Follow-up calls and emails were sent to these families to determine if they needed additional info. Also needed additional time to, unfortunately, time was not of the essence when they weren't able to participate. So additional families weren't able to be recruited. I hope that this is the beginning and not the end, and would love to be able to do it again. Upon completion of this training, families completed a retrospective pre and post assessment survey. The questions in the slide are about knowledge pre and post. The participants did the pre and post at the same time due to it being easier to administer. They answered these after completing the training. Additionally, I asked about the utility of training, how to improve the training, and what the information, what other information of the training that they would like to receive about sibling relationships. These next slides will show the results of the surveys, including the areas of greatest impact. Here we see that prior to the training, 1 of 4 families had indicated their knowledge was low, and after the training, all families had indicated had a marked increase of their knowledge. As you can see, all of the areas show a marked increase for knowledge. 100% of the families were either satisfied or very satisfied with the training. Comments thereafter, families indicated that the training will suffice for now, but that the additional training and/or information might be helpful, particularly related to managing trauma, is what families had indicated. Shortly after the surveys were completed, families participated in a discussion group to further share their views of the educational training. Overall, families felt the educational training was very helpful, and they plan to share it with others. Families utilized the opportunity during this discussion group to gather to support one another, and they shared some of their struggles as well. Noted here are some of the struggles and challenges that they noted when we met for the discussion group. So the educational training they thought was great and that many other families could benefit from it. But they did feel that they needed additional support to be able to better support sibling relationships. Again, here, just some additional comments that the families had in terms of supporting siblings in their home, and some of the struggles, increased challenges maintaining the bond when it came to that. And a family specifically cited the added stress of that siblings had in worrying about the safety and welfare of their siblings who were separated from them. So what were some of the lessons that I learned? For me, I think I started out this project very ambitious, and I think my goal was 25 families. I wanted to be able to meet with 25 families. And when we were in the office, we generally didn't have trouble getting families together. Families showed up to different events fairly regularly, and getting the word out was fairly easy. Definitely, there were some challenges with COVID, and we saw a lot of participation kind of across the board in a lot of the different groups and things that regularly met had lower participation. And this project was not exempt from that. So I definitely had to adapt and be okay with less being more. So initially when I thought, okay, there was only 5 families that had did the training, but one didn't participate in the group and then didn't complete the training. But when I looked at it, 10 children were touched by the families that participated in that. So while it may have seemed like a select few amount of families that participated, there were 10 children that now potentially have the opportunity to have better outcomes for their relationship than they would have. The families overall wanted more education, and they craved more. They wanted to know kind of what was next, and they want to be able to do better for siblings. Alone each family, they all thought that their situation was different, that theirs is the exception. Oh my goodness, nobody could have it worse than me. And when they all met together, just being able to really talk about and being able to be a support to one another, I think was even empowering for them. And one family like literally said like, oh gee, I don't have it so bad, but I would like for that, hopefully that can grow and that those families will continue to take part in supports that are going to help them. I had the opportunity to present my ARP to the Adoption Rhode Island staff. And they then completed a feedback survey thereafter, which I am very thankful for. The following slides, you will see that the staff indicated a greater sense of awareness after the presentation. It was interesting because I guess initially with getting feedback, with some of the questions, I felt like with us being an adoption agency and with us already having a focus and a greater lens on supporting sibling relationships, that, would it really, they know this stuff already. And to see that staff had commented on, that they had takeaways from the presentation, I was really excited to see. And actually that staff even shared different things and gave ideas kind of what's next. So, I appreciate that they did that, and to never assume, because there are many different areas within an agency. So development and all of that, they don't have the same, they're not looking at everything as the same lens as we are. And to have the opportunities to be able to hear specifically about what is affecting the children really makes a difference. So I learned that, even that was a lesson learned for me. So some of the, unfortunately, there were some inconsistencies in responses. Some participants only responded maybe to the awareness before, not after, and then vice versa. So there was some of the weighted averages was a little bit skewed, being that everyone didn't answer the same questions. The greatest impact areas were the needs that families identified so that they can support sibling relationships, and the availability, a greater availability for the sibling bond training for foster parents. The families, so the staff rather, they did provide some insight as to some things that they intended to do differently. How did they plan to move forward after having heard the presentation and receiving the information? And here you can see some of what they indicated. So in summary, everyone had, positive things to say and intended to do something differently, that there were takeaways. There were also requests for additional information on how they wanted to proceed. It would be great to receive information about resource providers can assist families with support in sibling relationships and such, which I've since followed up on. So as a recruiter, something I left out of my bio, but I was a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter with Adoption Rhode Island before beginning my current position, which I completely enjoyed and loved doing the work. So you were, yes, as we were tasked with, we had the harder to place kids, as they called it, and the ones that they said, kind of shouldn't ever be able to have a forever family. But that does not exist. There's no child is unadoptable. Unadoptable is unacceptable, is Wendy's Wonderful Kids way. As the recruiter, I worked with a youth who was part of a sibling group. One of the siblings had been adopted by a relative previously. The other three were in 3 different homes. And the recommendations were for the youth that I was working with to be placed alone due to their needs. Recruitment efforts included exploration of birth family, including the family member who had adopted the sibling. With support services, this family member was able to provide permanency to another child, bringing both siblings together. Opportunities for all 4 siblings to visit together occurred through an organized sibling-specific gathering at ARI's by ARI's recruitment team. The oldest sibling had tears in her eyes as they hugged their younger siblings to whom they had once cared for in a parentified role. Unfortunately, it had been a couple of years since they had last visited. After that last visit, the family member was so overwhelmed with emotions and feelings of wanting to keep these siblings together. Though the family member really wanted to be able to take in all 4 children, they knew that they were not able to support the needs of all of the children. The family member came together with the recruiter, being myself, the child welfare worker, and the child welfare worker supervisor to discuss how she could help. The recruiter, I encourage the family member to explore their network to see who do you know, charging it back to the family. Who do you know that you could bring to the table to be explored for permanency? Within days, the family member contacted me to state that they had identified a resource within her church community. I still remember that day. I could hear the background. I could hear buses, and they were getting off the city bus, and I answered the phone, and they were like, I found a family, with such excitement. Fast forward quite some time, that family was able to, the 2 younger siblings were adopted together with the older siblings, with that family member in attendance at the adoption. The child welfare worker wrote in the adoption summary that the family would be committed to maintaining the sibling connections. To this day, the families have honored their commitment, and they continue regular communication and visitation between the siblings. Though these siblings were unable to be supported in one home due to their needs, they were able to maintain continued contact. Children who were once in 4 different homes were now in 2 homes, with families that understood the importance of the sibling bond and were committed to doing everything they could to preserve it. Future considerations. The data that was obtained through the ARP was presented to my agency. There are plans to have additional conversations about how we may use the data to influence change on a state level. I'm definitely personally committed to improving the outcomes for siblings separated in care, and will continue to explore opportunities that will overcome these issues. Some of the proposed considerations are to make this training or a training similar available more widespread, and possibly even mandatory for prospective foster and adoptive parents, and maybe require annual completion as a refresher. As stated previously, after the project was presented during a staff meeting, one of my colleagues contacted me and began to discuss, what if there was a sibling pact? and described it like the permanency pact, where it's not necessarily a legal document, but definitely something that families would sign, indicating their commitment to preserving the sibling relationship. So that is something that I think is definitely worth exploring and could happen. Where do I begin? The impact that the MPLD has had on me, first and foremost, increase my confidence in gathering and analyzing data. What's data got to do with it? Everything. So I thank Sherilyn for her rendition of what's data got to do with it, because it will forever ring in my ears, in a positive way, of course. It provided me with a foundation to be an effective leader, provided me with a network of fellows and coaches that I knew I can call on at any time. And completing the ARP during a pandemic wouldn't have been possible without the support that we received. And it's definitely unmatched. Just the ability to be able to highlight the importance of the sibling relationship through the MPLD, through this project, has been, has made the difference, and sibling efforts will continue. Definitely, the support that I've had from even just my agency allowing me to back in me and providing me the support to be able to participate. My mentor, Kat, who is on here and has not missed a beat. I thank her for being there and providing that extra level of support, and being there when I did the focus groups and being that right-hand person. I still pending statistics from on our state level. That's one of the downsides of not being part of the, we're a private agency. So whereas some other fellows work within the child welfare agency, and maybe a little bit easier to get information, there's definitely more. I filled out the paperwork. They ask you, what is it you want it for? And I can imagine they're pretty protective about, what it is. And, I'm still waiting for that. So maybe one day I'll be able to add that. Some of the information that was requested was information specific to how many siblings are represented, how many siblings are separated in care, wanting to find out the exact numbers for Rhode Island. What is that number? And not only could I not find that for Rhode Island, but it's not something that is looked at. So while there are a lot of data on the racial disparities of children in care, there are not a lot of data at all. I think I found Texas that indicated some of what gave some numbers or some figures of how many kids or how many siblings that were separated in care, but nothing, not many states do a breakdown on how many siblings are separated. And I think because it's a hard truth, and people don't want to look at it. So that's definitely something that is worth exploring. And I hope that people will, that we can get some more data and statistics to support that, because that is going to provide for the funding that's needed to prevent siblings from having to sever their ties with their sibling. Thank you.